Since independence in 1962, we estimate that some 400 to 500,000 people have died in the conflict. There have been something like 800,000 refugees, tens of thousands of persons internally displaced. Burundi is second only to Rwanda in the magnitude of the killing that has occurred in a very short span of time.
On November 1st, 2001, the Burundi Transitional Government, put in place by the Arusha Peace Accord, started its first 18-month administration, marking the beginning of the recovery process in Burundi. In conjunction with this transitional period, in 2002, the World Bank's Post-Conflict Fund and the Woodrow Wilson Center's Africa Project launched the Burundi Leadership Training Program. The training program was designed to deepen the capacity for leaders in Burundi to work together to guide the country's post-war reconstruction and to achieve sustainable economic growth. I'm Sharana Ward, reporting from the Woodrow Wilson Center in Washington, D.C. On May 13, 2003, Africa Project Director Dr. Howard Wolpe presented a day-long report and evaluation of the program and its impact here at the Woodrow Wilson Center. Panel members included Program Manager Steve McDonald, former Human Rights Minister and Project Consultant Eugene Ninderera, trainers Elizabeth McClintock, Program Director of Cambridge-based Conflict Management Group, and Elaine Lempereur, Director of the Paris Institute for Research and Education on Negotiation in Europe, and program participants Remy Nahimana, Secretary General of the Burundi Catholic Peace and Justice Commission, and Domitilla Berencia, President of the Constitutional Court of Burundi. The process of targeting officials for the training program was very crucial to the development of the workshops. Dr. Wolpe discussed the importance of creating such a diverse group of individuals to represent Burundi.
We also knew that we wanted to make each training group that we would assemble. Had decided that we would target approximately 100 Burundian leaders in the initial phase of this effort, and we would work with about 35 at a time in the training process. And we wanted each of these training working groups to be representative of Burundi.
As the principal funding source to the training program, the World Bank was especially instrumental in the development and structuring of the capacity building initiative in Burundi.
The World Bank was very keenly interested in this project because they recognized that sustainable growth in Burundi, as well as the political agreements that, as well as the sustainability of the political agreements that have been negotiated or that are being negotiated, that none of that would be sustainable, in fact, without deepening the capacity of Burundian leaders to work together, to work collaboratively.
Other donor agencies, active NGOs in Burundi, practitioners in the field of conflict resolution and economic recovery, and those involved in Great Lakes regional issues were invited to gain an understanding of the background to the conflict in Burundi and the methodologies being used in the training program.
The training methods we are utilizing in this project are not novel. What is new is their application to reconciliation processes at the level of a nation state and to the task of post-war economic reconstruction. What is new is the strategic approach that has been taken to the development of a network of leaders that are capable of guiding the country's economic recovery and committed to the implementation of concrete projects of economic recovery.
The training methodologies implemented during the workshops were primarily participant-centered, participant-oriented, problem-solving centered, and community-centered. The trainers relied on interactive and experiential methods, role-playing and simulations, so that Burundi leaders could take an active role in shaping their own workshop experience. Workshop trainers Elizabeth McClintock and Elaine Lempereur described in detail both the workshop content and methodology. The primary objective of the workshops was to strengthen the participants' collaborative and decision-making skills, visioning, communications, team building, and strategic planning. Throughout the program, both trainers remain responsive to the expressed interests and concerns of the workshop participants themselves. During her presentation, McClintock pointed out the importance of the connection between the needs of the Burundi leaders and those in the general population.
How do we connect the leadership to the communities? As our Burundian colleagues have mentioned a number of times, there seems to be a huge difference between the interests of the leaders and how those interests are manifested versus the needs and desires of the general population. And so that can become a very challenging way. How do you link those two? That's one of our major challenges. And finally, community-centered, by bringing in people from the grassroots level, leaders that are identified in women's organizations, youth organizations, the ecumenical community, et cetera, we wanted to make sure that there was sort of less a trickle-down effect and more of a ground-up experience. So how do we help those leaders at the grassroots level share these skills and tools? And then again, the impetus of the World Bank is very much on economic recovery, so we had to keep that as our primary focus. And in fact, that assisted us, I think, greatly in terms of not trying to pretend that this is a substitute for the negotiation project, but negotiation process, but instead really an opportunity to have the Burundians themselves decide where they're going in the future.
Dr. Wolpe went on to describe the careful and strategic preparations that preceded the implementation of the Burundi leadership workshops. The selection of the workshop participants was designed to ensure gender, ethnic, and regional balance, and the inclusion of representatives of all Burundi's key social and institutional sectors.
I met over a period, Steve McDonald and I met over a period of about several months with about 70 to 80 key role players or stakeholders in Burundi, inside and outside of the government. And we did two things in those conversations. One was to secure their effective endorsement of this process. And we succeeded in doing that, not only with people in the government and civil society, but we succeeded in securing that essential endorsement of all of the rebel groups, all 7, even the FNL. Which chose not to participate in the first training, came back with a message saying they thought this project was meritorious, they wanted to be involved down the road when security conditions permitted.
In spite of the success of the training program, former Human Rights Minister and project consultant Eugene Ninderera candidly expressed the initial apprehensions and concerns he experienced before embarking upon the training workshops.
C'était de savoir,
for a number of years.
est-ce que ça ne va
The concern I had was to see whether or not this was just going to be one more project that was not going to result in peace, or were people going to be able to really say what they felt, or were they going to keep things inside? And also, in comparison with other projects that I experienced, I wanted to know what the capacity was going to be beyond the week of training or the time that we spent together in sometimes very ideal conditions. What would happen after? What would the follow-up be? What would allow us to continue making progress and not just have a one-time interesting activity that really doesn't have any follow-up?
As the meeting progressed, Lempereur and President of the Constitutional Court of Burundi, Domitilla Barencia, tackled the delicate issue of facilitators implementing concepts from a Western point of view into a traditional Burundian society.
Are we just importing, for example, Western concepts to Africa, or should we in some ways build the content of the program on the basis of the traditions? And I think we had very interesting dialogues about that. So I don't know if you want to react on that issue.
Nous nous sommes posé la question avec le projet que Monsieur Wolpe vient
We've talked
d'initier
about
chez nous.
this issue, and as Mr. Wolpe was saying, and this is perhaps also a partial response to my colleague's question just now,
parler d'un programme trop
talking
général,
about
trop
can
général
we
qui
say that the
pourrait
program is too
s'attaquer-
general?
il faudrait s'attaquer aux problèmes
And it's
actuels
true,
de
we
la
do
classe
need to
politique
deal with the current issues, the
pour
current
peut-être
problems with the
passer
political
aussi
class,
de la théorie au
and we
concret.
need to
Ce n'est
be able to
peut-être pas
go from theory to
importer des-
concrete.
Il y a des théories qui doivent s'importer.
But of course,
de
there
toute
are
façon.
theories that have
Mais
to be
elles doivent
imported
être,
nonetheless, but
tropicalisées,
how?
acclimatées.
You know,
Et je crois
even if we're
que
importing Western theories,
il y a
we
des
have to
théories qui
adapt
sont
them. We have
universelles de
to
toutes les façons. L'important
adapt
est
them to our
peut-être que ces
context.
théories qui nous sont données
So there are
ne
some
soient
universal
pas
theories and
dictées
lessons, and
et
they're not necessarily being
peut-être
dictated to
digérées
us,
comme
but they can be
telles.
imported and we
Parce que
can
j'ai vu
digest
qu'au
them
niveau des
and apply
séances que
them
nous
in
avions
our
à
way.
faire, cette théorie était testée sur
And this theory,
les théories locales.
of
Donc,
course,
sur les
is also
faits
going to be
réels.
tested on a
On a
local
parlé de
level
SIMSOC.
when we have
Cette
real facts, real events. We talked about SIMSOC,
Société simulée.
the
On en est
simulated
venu
society.
à trouver dans une simulation tout à fait
We
ordinaire,
were
on a
doing this
retrouvé nos
simulation, which
problèmes à
was
nous.
entirely
On
ordinary,
a
but we were
retrouvé
also
dans
dealing
ces
with our
sous-groupes
specific
les uns
issues.
les plus
We were
fortunés que d'autres.
dealing with groups where some were stronger than others. We had Hutus and Tutsis. We had marginalized people. We had those who were privileged.
Sont de toutes les façons quelque part
And
remis
all these ideas
à la couleur locale et que de toutes les façons elles doivent être
were
assimilées
adapted,
par nous-mêmes
and they
comme
have to be adapted by us on a local level.
des principes, voilà, des outils qui
We
doivent
need to
nous
take these
aider
principles
à
and these
résoudre
tools
des
that can
problèmes
help us and then
particuliers
use them
précis.
to
Et je crois que je suis
resolve
tout
our
à fait
specific
d'accord avec
issues and
vous.
problems.
According to Dr. Wopi, so far the overall reaction to the training program has been positive. The lessons have been able to bring about major changes in thinking paradigms among the participants that have extended far beyond the workshops. Secretary General of the Burundi Catholic Peace and Justice Commission, Remy Nahimana, one of the first workshop attendees, articulated the lessons that he has learned during the workshops and how he has been able to implement them into his own life.
Étant l'un des premiers bénéficiaires,
Since I'm one of the first beneficiaries,
personnellement, moi,
Personally,
j'ai déjà utilisé
I've already
les
used
éléments
the elements
acquis de
that
la
I've
formation.
learned from the training.
Et d'ailleurs, au mois d'avril, lorsque nous avons
During the month of April,
nous nous sommes retrouvés pour la deuxième fois.
when we met again for the second
première question à
time,
laquelle nous
the
avions à
first
répondre,
question we had
c'était
to answer was,
Comment avez-vous
how have you
vécu,
lived
appliqué
or
les
applied
concepts ou les
the
méthodes apprises dans le
concepts
premier
and methods
séminaire?
that you learned in the first workshop?
Et je vous disais tout à l'heure
And I was telling you earlier
avant de
that
venir ici, je venais d'animer
before
un
coming here,
séminaire
I
pour
was
des
just
religieux
running a
sur le
seminar
concept de
for
justice
our
et paix.
religious people under the title of Justice and
techniques
Peace.
De
The techniques
d'amener les
to
participants
bring
à ne
participants
pas seulement
to
recevoir
not only
l'information, mais à
receive
produire
information, but to
l'information, à gérer
produce
l'information et même
information and to
en vue
manage
d'arriver à des
information,
décisions
to come
d'action.
to
C'est quelque chose qui, pour moi,
actions
était
and
renforcé par
decisions.
cette formation. Et
These,
je l'ai utilisé,
these
c'est
are
très
things that I
efficace.
learned from my training, and it was
Il y a eu
extremely
une journée où
useful.
les participants
There was
ont
a day when
travaillé
the
eux-mêmes
participants
seuls.
worked
Et le soir, il y avait
alone,
des résultats très,
and
très,
that
très bons.
evening
C'est un
they
exemple.
came with very good results.
Et
That's one example.
comme nous sommes déjà responsables dans différents
As we're
services,
already responsible,
c'est donc un appui qui vient
it's a
justement renforcer
support.
nos
It's a
capacités.
support to help us in our
À moins
endeavors.
qu'on y
However, according to Ninderera, time limitations are a big challenge for participants. He said it's crucial to begin solidifying cohesiveness between the different officials during the workshops so that cooperation can be continued long after Dr. Wopi and the trainers have gone.
Le grand problème pour moi, c'est le temps. C'est le temps. Parce
Time
qu'effectivement,
is
il y a
the
une
biggest
dynamique
challenge. There's
qui
a
s'est créée, il y a des
dynamic that is
relations
being
qui se sont
created and
créées,
relationships
mais
that are
chacun
developed, but each person has to go back to his normal milieu. Each person has their personal problems, material problems, psychological problems, political problems. Each one returns to his program, his agenda, and so it's necessary to find a mechanism to maintain this flame within the group. So far, it's working well, but it's the biggest danger that we need to be aware of. But for me, the evolution and change is real, and as Nomitil said earlier, now it's the members of the group must assume the responsibility and take more initiative to deal with the questions raised. But I do believe that the regular meetings that we are holding are important to continue to address these questions. I know that the 27th of May, we're already planning a meeting, and there will be questions that will be raised. One of which is how, as a group, can we help the global process move ahead? And these are the questions that will be asked between the members of the group. The Ambassador Wolpe will not be there, and the trainers will not be there. So there is a certain dynamic that will continue.
Nonetheless, the initial success of the training program has prompted suggestions for additional initiatives. Key Army leaders have explored the idea of a series of training workshops for selected Army and rebel military commanders to prepare for security reform negotiations. Consideration has also been given to organizing a training retreat for the new transitional cabinet, including the President and Vice President and the parliamentary leadership. Still, other ideas involve proposed workshops for provincial administrators and elected officials.
And as Domitille expressed so well, the linkages of people in this group to all sorts of networks that are existing or that are in the process of being created is very substantial. And finally, we do not see this initial training of 100 as the end of a process. We see it as the beginning of a process, and we see are expanding into other training projects that will involve new sets of people. So within a 3-year period, I would think we will have brought into a training process something closer to that 200 number that I originally intended.
Although it's still too early to expect the launching of actual projects, intense planning efforts are underway while expectations run high. From the Woodrow Wilson Center, I'm Sharana Ward.